Dinners at restaurants Mara had drooled over? No longer their problem. Every detail I had poured myself into was undone in minutes. And as I sat back watching the last confirmation email roll in, I didn't feel regret. I felt free. Let them. Land in Paris with no hotel. Let them drag their bags through the streets, scrambling for a cheap hostel. Let Caleb step up for once, if he even could. I could almost laugh, picturing him trying to figure out how to book a room with no money. The guy couldn't even pay his phone bill, let alone fix a disaster like this. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my beer, waiting. It wouldn't take long. Sure enough, my phone started buzzing. Mara, then Rita, then Caleb. I didn't answer. I let them stew in their mess. The voicemails piled up. Rita's was first, sharp and screechy. "What do you mean there's no reservation? We're at the hotel and they're saying the suite was canceled. Fix this." Deleted. Mara's voice came next, full of venom. "What did you do? The car wasn't there. The hotel's got nothing. We're stuck. You can't just leave us like this." Deleted. Caleb's was last, low and whiny. "Dude, this isn't cool. Why isn't the car here? The hotel's acting like we're crazy. What's going on?" Deleted. I leaned back, a grin tugging at my lips. Not cool? Yeah, well, neither was kicking me off my own trip. More texts. Rolled in. Mara. "This isn't funny." "Call me." Rita. "You've ruined everything." Caleb. "Bro." Seriously. I ignored them all. Let them panic. Let them feel what it was like to be left behind. For once, I wasn't the one fixing everything. For once, I was the one in control. And damn, it felt good. The next afternoon, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Paul, my best friend since high school, standing there with a six-pack of beer in one hand and a grin on his face. "Heard you had a wild night," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. I shut the door, behind him, and shrugged. "Something like that." He popped the beers on the coffee table, cracked one open, and grinned. "Tell me everything." I sat back, took a sip of my drink, and for the first time in years, I smiled like I meant it. I had nothing to fix, nothing to regret. And for once in my life, I was finally free. Paul cracked one open for himself and handed me another. "Tell me you didn't let them get away with it," he said, settling onto the couch like he owned the Yached place. I took the beer, popped the cap, and smirked. "Check your email." Paul's eyes lit up as he pulled out his phone, scrolling through the messages I'd sent him. The canceled flights, the hotel refunds, the whole mess. He let out a loud, barking laugh that filled the room. "You're a legend, man. They really thought you'd just, what, drive the getaway car for their affair and wave bye-bye with a smile?" I sat down across from him, taking a sip of the beer. "Pretty much. 2 years I worked for that trip, and they swapped me out for Caleb like it was nothing." Paul shook his head, still chuckling. "Caleb, that guy can't even tie his own shoes, without help. And Mara thought he'd what? Slide right into your first-class seat?" I nodded, the memory still sharp. "She said he needed rest, like I'm running a charity for her deadbeat friends." Paul leaned forward, his grin fading into something more serious. "You know what this is, right? It's not just about the trip. It's about respect. They've been walking all over you for years and you finally put your foot down." I stared at the beer in my hand, turning the bottle slowly. He wasn't wrong. I'd spent so long trying to keep everyone happy. Mara, her parents, even myself, that I'd let them treat me like a doormat. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I guess I did." Paul clapped his hands together, breaking the moment. "And it's about damn time. I mean, come on, man. They thought they could ditch you and keep the fancy vacation? That's some next-level nerve." He took a long swig, then pointed at me. "You're too quiet sometimes, you know that? People think they can push you around because you don't make a fuss. But this was loud. This was you saying, Not anymore. I couldn't help but smile a little. Didn't feel loud, just felt right. He nodded like he got it. That's the best kind of loud, the kind they don't see coming. We sat there as the afternoon sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the yard. The air was warm, the beer was cold, and for the first time in a while, I didn't feel like I was carrying the weight of everyone else's problems. Paul kept talking, tossing out ideas about what they might be doing in Paris now. Stuck in some dingy hostel, maybe? Or arguing over who pays for a cab. Bet Caleb's already whining about his back. I chuckled, picturing it. Probably. Mara's already called me a dozen times, yelling about how I ruined everything. Paul raised an eyebrow. And what did you tell her? I shrugged. Told her she made her choice. Hung up. He whistled long and low. Cold, man. I like it. We clinked bottles together, letting the moment settle. Paul was right. This wasn't just about the trip. It was about loyalty, betrayal, about me finally, seeing that I didn't have to keep taking it. You know, Paul said after a while, I've been waiting for you to snap like this. You're too good a guy to let them keep treating you like that. I looked out at the yard, the grass needing a trim, the fence I'd been meaning to paint. Maybe I was too good. Not anymore, Paul grinned. That's my boy. Now what? Gonna let them crawl back and beg forgiveness? I shook my head. Not this time. They can figure it out without me. He laughed again, loud and free, and we sat there talking until the sun went down. About old times, about how sometimes the quietest guys make the biggest moves. And for once, I didn't feel invisible. Paul saw me, really saw me. And that was enough for now. I woke up the next morning with the sun sneaking through the blinds, no phone buzzing, no voices yelling at me through the line. For the first time in days, I didn't feel that knot in my chest, that heavy twist of anger and hurt. I shuffled to the kitchen, brewed a pot of coffee, and stood there, leaning against the counter, letting my mind settle. Yesterday, on that porch facing Mara and her parents, I'd drawn a line. They weren't going to cross it again. Not if I could help it. I poured the coffee into a mug, took a sip, and decided it was time to start rebuilding, not their mess, but my life. I'd been putting off a project for years, fixing up the old shed out back. A rickety thing, half buried in weeds. I'd always wanted to turn it into something useful. A workshop, maybe, or just a place to sit and think. I grabbed my toolbox from the garage, pulled on some old jeans and a flannel, and headed outside. The air was crisp, the kind that wakes you up. I started yanking out the overgrown grass around the shed, feeling the dirt under my nails. It was hard work, but good. Every tug and pull felt like I was clearing out more than just weeds. By afternoon, the shed was starting to look like something again. I sat on an old crate inside, wiping sweat off my forehead, sipping water from a bottle. It wasn't done yet, but it was a start. That night, I booked a solo trip, just a weekend, in the mountains. A little cabin. No fancy hotels, no first-class nonsense. Just me, some trees, and a lake. Back home a few days later, I sat down at my laptop and pulled up the shared bank account, Mara's favorite ATM. She'd been dipping into it for years, treating it like her personal piggy bank, and I'd let her. Not anymore. I moved what was mine into a new account, one she couldn't touch, and closed the old one out. Then I blocked Caleb's number. No more whining texts, no more excuses. My phone felt lighter after that, like I'd shaken off a leech. Mara sent a string of messages later that day, long ones, trying to explain herself. It wasn't about you, she wrote. Caleb just needed help. I didn't think it'd hurt you like this. I let the words sit there for a minute, then typed back one line. It's your turn to figure things out without me. I hit send and closed the app. No more back and forth. No more guilt trips. The silence that came after was golden. Pure. Clean. I grabbed a beer from the fridge, cracked it open, and stepped outside. The shed still needed work, and I'd probably head back to the mountains soon. But for now, I just sat there, letting the quiet wash over me. They'd taken me for granted too long, counted on me to hold everything together while they did whatever they wanted. Not anymore. I took a sip, the cold hitting my throat, and smiled to myself. This was my time now, my terms, my rules, and I wasn't going back.